I call the meeting to order. We'll assume Kate's there. We do need to, it's a Zoom, so we do need to do a roll call, and I'm just going to do it in order of the boxes in front of me. So Joe Palumbo,
Here.
Tui Rogers, here. Polly Reeve,
Here.
Nancy Frizella Lee,
Here.
Krista Collins,
Here.
and Kate James.
Here. Hi.
Hi, okay, we're all together. Well, there's another Kate on the list too, I guess. But okay, so we are all in attendance. And I think the only other thing we need, do we want to do the minutes, or should we save our minutes, which are really from the working group, for next time? I think
Well,
Polly,
I sent out, Tui, I sent out the minutes from our January 30th meeting of the whole.
right.
Yeah, so let's approve those, Dewey.
Excellent. Okay, so excellent point, Polly. So this is for the January 30th meeting, the minutes that were sent out. Did anyone have any questions, comments, or edits? Okay, all in favor of accepting the January 30th minutes of the Permanent Memorial Subcommittee, say aye. Aye.
To do a roll call?
Okay, roll call. Joe Palumbo.
Yes.
Tui Rogers, yes. Polly Reeve.
Aye, yes.
Nancy Frizella Lee.
Yes.
And Krista Collins.
Yes.
Kate James.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we have approved the minutes and we can move on. Joe, I'm going to turn it over to you for discussion on the next points.
We always start with a spot for check-in. We've been working on this last month about if there are sorry, I apologize. Are there any items that have come up or things you've heard or things you wanted folks to know about that need a check-in or clarification? So I'm making a spot for that. Does anyone have anything? Okay, I have one. Last time, Nancy, one of the working group meetings, you asked about the status of the, I don't know what they call the other work group, the historians advisory group that we had tried to start. And the update with them, there's two things. One, if you remember before the winter break, there was the town was trying to figure out what their status would be, because whether they subcommittee of a subcommittee and open meeting law. And so they kind of went on hold until we sorted that out. While they were on hold, we did a lot of work to basically put our design work on hold and take it in a new direction and do all this reevaluating we're doing now. So there was really no need for them to continue to try to write content for an exhibit, a memorial that is not at a stage where it needs that kind of content. So their chair, Elise Lemire, talked to them, and their agreement is they're going to produce a little report of like some recommendations for us to think about in terms of like, whatever you do when you're going forward, think of these things in terms of content and think of these things in terms of process with your community. And that based on their work schedule, I know they're not meeting anymore. They've tasked Elise with kind of pulling their notes together, and based on her work schedule, because they're doing this all voluntarily, she thought maybe by early April, there'll be a little report that will come to our subcommittee that we can read and share. And it might be helpful to us to have an outside pair of eyes giving us some advice. So that's sort of where that's left. They're no longer meeting, and the next thing will be a report to us. So, Krista.
Yeah, question about that, because my ears perked up at when you said they might have some suggestions about when you talk to members of the community, make sure you do XYZ. And would that be helpful if those were points she could give us in advance of the full report that she plans to do? That might be helpful as we take the show on the road.
Yeah. I think they'll probably come out about the same time, but I'll ask her if there's any like quickies. That's a good one. Okay, so going on to today's agenda, I think one of the things that's really strong about the way this work has proceeded is we're trying to have a work group, take it offline, get some stuff done, and then bring it to the whole committee for review. So really our purpose today, so the work group has done work that they want some feedback on around this presentation. And it's very difficult in a large group to have a writer get good feedback that's useful to them. So I want to suggest a process that I think the way that Polly and Joe can't be here. He had some family, I think a family health, helping out someone at home that he had to take care of today. So this feedback is really going to be for Joe and for Polly. But basically our goal is for Polly to kind of, she sent us everything ahead of time to think about where they're at in building this presentation. And our job is to have Polly teach it to us. Then we'll ask clarifying questions to make sure we understand what they're talking about. And then we'll give them some feedback so they can continue on the work. And then Polly, if you have other questions you want us to answer after we give you feedback, there should be time for that as well. So that's sort of what we're going to do. Hopefully everyone had a time to look at their work so far. And Polly, whenever you're ready, why don't you go ahead and tell us what you want us to know about what you've sent us.
Well, sure. So Tui and Nancy have already participated in this, and Joe Hibbard, of course. So in our first working group meeting, we sort of divided up responsibilities, and Joe and I took on the task of trying to prepare an outline for what will become a presentation for these focus groups, focusing on how did we get here? You know, the question of what work has the committee done? What have we thought about? What decisions have we made? What decisions are we re-evaluating at this point, and therefore need as much feedback as we can get from the community. And so what I sent you is a little bit further than it was when Tui and Nancy last saw it. But it is meant to be that piece, the explanation of what the committee's been charged with, what we've been doing, and then setting the stage for hopefully a very meaty and fruitful conversation with these groups that we'll be bringing together. So do you have it, what's the best way for me to share this with you? Do you have copies in front of you, or do you have it on your screen, or because I can, okay. Then I'll just sort of quickly walk through what our thinking has been. And I'm really, the reason we wanted to get the whole group together at this point was to see, to kind of see if you think we're on the right track here, because we can spend a lot more time fleshing this out. And if we're not going, you're not pointing in the right direction, it's probably a waste of time. So, so I really would love your thoughts after I'll review where we are and sort of where it ends, because it isn't complete. You probably figured that out. It's not complete, but it's meant to set the stage. So in any case, so we thought we would do well to introduce the committee. We're imagining that these will be different, groups of different constituencies, and probably different sizes, but we want this, the idea is that this is a template that can work for everything. So we're going to do a little background on our committee, and then talk about the 3 tasks that we took on. Very brief summary of the trees. And we're thinking about this, 60 seconds on trees, 60 seconds on the archival research project, which we realize we don't really know exactly where that stands. So we're going to have to get that information. And
can I just interrupt you for 1 second? I just sent you something about that. I asked as we agreed to talk about that, and I just sent it a little while ago.
Oh, thank you very much. I missed it. I'm sorry, Nancy. Thank you. So, but very quick on those 2, and then say the 3rd project is a memorial park to be located on town land on Monument Square. We've been working hard on this, and we have a conceptual design, but we recognize that it is not universally loved, and there's some questions about it and opposition to it. And so we want to meet with you and other groups like this to let you know about how we got here, and to seek your feedback on the park, on our plans for the park to strengthen the design. So we're going to be engaging the community and sharing things about the park that seem to have wide acceptance. We've heard, that our statement of purpose, which I was thinking about this, we spent many months coming up with that, and it has been revised over the years. So the statement of purpose, the site selection, the idea of creating and inviting space that can serve multiple purposes while shining a light on those values that enliven everything we do when we think about the American Revolution and our democracy. Disengage ourselves from the current controversial park design to backtrack a bit in our decision-making process. They're critical decision points that we want to review with them. For example, using narrative content as opposed to sculptural imagery. We want to find out, was that a sound decision? It's one that we made, and we thought it, and we felt what made a lot of sense, but we want to explain how we got there and see what people think about that. Discussions about where we go next. So then we thought we could break that up, to look at the mission, talk about how the monument, the idea of what a monument is really has changed over the years and is continuing to change. And there is actually a great deal of work being done right now on how we memorialize people and events. And it's in the process of growing and evolving as our country is in the process of growing and evolving. Talking about the process that we went through to come up with our mission statement, the 3 sessions that we had, what we heard. We can refer to the Monuments Lab, which I think informed a lot of our work early on and the work that they're doing. Originally, I thought we should show that video, but I think we don't have the time in these sessions to show that video, but encourage people to see it. And then pause and ask for feedback. Is this a mission that people are behind and agree, because we understand that this is something that people agree on. Then talk about the site, looking at the site, looking quickly at our site analysis, the different organizations of the space that we considered, and the function, the sort of the list of things that we wanted the site to accomplish once it was completed, providing places for gathering, places for sitting and reflecting, and places for learning, and ways that we thought about screening and replacing invasive plants with native plants and so on. Again, think about this and offer comment, and then get into the design. So look at the proposed design that we have in front of us. And our thinking here is we want to be super clear that we're encouraging people to poke at this, but this is something to respond to. And in people's response, we will learn about what is the vision for the space. I think it's safe to say we all want to build the best thing we possibly can build, and we're going to get closer to that by listening carefully. The elements that are included in the proposed design, the timeline wall and the vertical stele, and then take a step back and talk about that decision that we made that led to the proposed design. The decision to incorporate stories, narrative stories of people with ties to Concord who worked for various facets of social justice and civil rights and liberty, and stories that aren't commonly known, and talk about some examples. But then say we also looked at other things. We looked at architectural solutions. We looked at sculptural solutions. We ended up making this decision to move in this direction, but let's think about what would be involved if we took a different direction. And then we really, at the end of this, as you see, there are a lot of images. We kind of stopped at that point, because I think then we're getting into the dialogue part of the presentation. And we will want to have some visuals to distribute and to talk about, but I think that our goal was to come up with the kind of part A, which is setting the stage. How did we get here, and what do we want out of these sessions? So that's the summary. And
So
I'm interested to know if you think we're
that's
on
the
the right
summary
path.
of the setting the stage part
Yes.
of the presentation, and that's as far as you've gotten. Is that correct?
That is we've talked more about the
No,
rest, but that's as
no
far as we've
pressure, but
gotten.
I'm just,
Yes.
we're giving you feedback on the opening, basically.
That would be really helpful. Yes.
Okay.
And where it and kind of where we are taking it to
Yeah.
this conversation about narrative versus sculpture.
So I think what would be helpful then is for all of us on the committee to ask Polly clarifying questions about what she just described or what you read. And remember, a clarifying question is a question you really don't have an answer in your head already. If you already have an answer in your head, that's really more feedback. Save it for the feedback. clarifying questions are like, are you planning to show visuals during this section? Yes or no? How long did you think that first section was? These are clarifying questions. If you have an opinion, save it for feedback. So what clarifying questions do you have for Polly? Kate,
Hey.
go ahead. You guys unmute yourself though.
I don't, I have a question about process. Are we going to do one item at a time? Everybody will comment on one thing, like on the trees to start.
No, anything in
Or
what
should I say everything about the whole thing?
Yeah, anything that was a clarifying question, that's what we're doing now. If it's feedback, we'll do it in a minute. We're just trying to get
I
clarifying
understand.
questions
Yeah.
out of the way first. Yeah.
All right. How when you say the info, I'm very interested in the things that have already happened, like the 250 trees. When you say you're just going to do something brief, obviously that's not on this document. So I would like to know, I think that it deserves a lot of praise. And I think it's a
So you're wondering
it
how
was-
much you're
yeah.
wondering how much time
How much
currently is
time?
on.
When you said like 2 minutes, I feel like it really deserves more than that.
So that's good
I
feedback.
mean, I feel like it's an accolade. Sorry, that's a feedback. I didn't. Sorry.
Any other clarifying questions or things you don't know the answer to or have an opinion?
Okay, never mind.
In terms of, yeah, the actual presentation, Polly, have you talked about kind of, would this be a PowerPoint?
Yeah, I think eventually, I mean, my assumption is that and what Joe and I are thinking is that it will turn into a PowerPoint. And so it will for the in-person meetings, but we also hope that it can become a printed document that can be distributed at the meeting so people can take it home and read about them, or, and maybe it can go on a website somewhere so that there's more information floating around about this. That may be ambitious, but the primary purpose is to have a presentation that works during these sessions. But I do think we need to have some handouts that might have a little bit more.
And I think just to jump in here, Krista, on that, one of the aspects of our little working group is to figure out where would this go. Polly and Joe are making the base document, and from that we might pull a smaller piece to put in the bridge. From that we might pull something that might just focus primarily on the trees for Ag Day. From that we might, in other words, we would take this base document and it would become the river from which all the streams, the Instagram posting, the Facebook posting, the thing we would do at the schools, it wouldn't be the entire document all the time.
Okay.
Polly,
Polly, were you about to say something?
Well, I was just going to say one thing that I want to make sure I understood this properly. So regarding, for instance, the trees or the library project, Joe and I have really been focusing on the park. This is really about the park. And so the reason that we didn't give a whole lot of time to the trees or to the other project is because that's not why we're getting everybody together. We're getting everybody together to talk about the park. And so that's, maybe that's not what we should be doing, but that's what we're doing.
That's all right. So before we go to feedback, other clarifying questions, something you didn't understand that you want answered, that you don't have an answer to. Nancy.
This isn't a clarifying question. This is just a follow-up to what Polly said. We had these presentations have a specific agenda. And so while we definitely want to give praise to the tree project, and it's a wonderful project, that's not what these presentations are about. That was just part of the overview of all the work that the subcommittee has done. And one of the real issues is that there's not enough time. We're going to be limited. And if we keep talking about all these things, we won't have enough time for people to give their input. And that's, to me, the most important part.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you for helping answer that. Great. Any other questions of clarification? All right, seeing none. Now, Kate, please start giving some feedback, and then it's a free for all. Any feedback you want to give Polly, and Polly doesn't have to answer, doesn't have to defend. She just takes it all in and takes notes. And the only questions she might.
Ooh. Joe froze. Joe, you froze.
You froze, Joe. Yeah. At least your eyes are open.
Oh, no, Joe, come back.
Oh, I think
Oh,
you're
now
back.
he's back.
You froze,
he's
Joe.
back.
Froze.
Yeah,
Oh, no, he froze again.
good old Concord. Okay. But basically, what Joe's saying is now it's time for feedback. Polly does not have to respond to the feedback, but that this is the time for Polly to
Yeah.
get other valuable
Takes it all
information.
in so her and Joe can react to it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, is Kate, Kate, did you want to, were you going to go?
No, I'm
Oh.
not going to go. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank
I
you.
can go.
Okay, Krista?
First, thanks for, it's clear how much time and thought and effort went into this. And, I think there's a lot of great stuff in here. I think the few kind of things that jumped out at me, were sort of the sequence. And I almost felt like that it would be helpful for people to go through kind of in the order that we went through it. And we kind of started looking at all the different types of monuments and then, you know, kind of developed ideas from things that we learned about in the sort of more recent monument movement. So I would almost put those types of images at the beginning to kind of as a part of that stage setting process. The way that the third paragraph on the first page was, the sort of reference to the opposition didn't sit well with me. I feel like it's important that we're getting more feedback. The opposition to come from a very small and very vocal group of people that have time to attend our meetings. And I don't think it's reflective of, you know, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, we had a lot of positive feedback at some of the public forums. So it just doesn't sit well with me to sort of frame this as like this, there was opposition that made us step back and I may be in the minority in that opinion. I think it's healthy to go out and get more feedback on this design. And I don't think we should be, I don't feel like this presentation is really disengaging from that design at all. It's giving people another opportunity to look at it, understand how we got there, offer feedback and suggest alternatives. And I think that's the important part is to if people have other ideas that what we show them, you know, inspires, we want to hear that. And then the third point was just that, I think some of the language needs to be more accessible to a general audience. Having gotten a degree in art history and architecture and worked for architects or landscape architecture and worked for architects and landscape architects, I understand that there's a very specific language that designers use to talk about space and people's experience in space. And I think we just need to bring it down to a level that's more accessible to a general audience. So those are kind of the three major takeaways for me.
I had the same thoughts. I thought about it a little differently. I felt like in general, I felt like when I first read it that it felt very defensive and I didn't feel it needed to be. And that's why I brought up the tree part where I thought like, we should be proud of, I mean, I didn't even do any of the trees, but this group should be really proud of what they've done and should really own it and not come up from a position of, oh, you guys, put us down and now we've got to fight for this. That is not what we're doing. I don't think that just puts the wrong slant on it for me. I mean, I also was caught up in the language. I thought it was also too long. I got a little bored, frankly. I thought it was so much more interesting in my head than it was there. I felt like there was too much information and I couldn't retain it, kind of. And speaking to that, I felt like at the end there were these beautiful drawings that I've actually never seen of it.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, why isn't that first? That
Yeah.
is gorgeous.
They're
Yeah.
brand
is
new.
like-
That's why you haven't seen them.
Well,
Yeah.
there you go. I thought maybe
You
I
lead
just,
with that.
I thought maybe I was asleep or something, because
Yeah, they're beautiful. I agree.
looking at those, I was like, I love this. This looks
Right.
beautiful.
It gives it
And
proportion.
that is what people need. They don't know, you know, they need to see how beautiful it could be.
Mhm.
And I think people question things when they don't understand, you know.
Mhm.
Makes sense. So yeah, the order of it, I didn't feel like, not that I want you to make a, you know, an argument. I just felt like I want that to be in their head first, and then to talk about why this is such a beautiful plan. You know, that's
Great. More
That's-
feedback for Polly and Joe.
That's great.
So
And
am I unmuted? Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I agree with almost everything that people have said. I too, agree with what Krista said. I think I would just phrase it differently. I don't think that very many people have actually had a chance to weigh in. So the opposition is a small number of people. But I do want that in because I am one of those people that I have some questions and some issues with the design. And so I don't want, I would like the presentation to be honest about that, that there are some questions, and I'll, you know, yeah, I'll refine that more as we go on designing this presentation. Yeah, so it's just a matter of wording, and I think this is just a word draft. I mean, I could quibble with some other things. For example, Palumbo just gave us the comment about the content working group being disbanded, and in here it says it, you know, it was disbanded for current lack of funding, and he didn't say that, and I don't think that's a major part of it. So,
no, it's not.
but I know,
No,
Polly, just a rough draft, so I don't want to talk about things like that, but you know, that wording was, yeah, was a question for me too. And I also like I also have a little bit of, some different ideas about how things should be ordered. And I definitely think it's too long. I think that some of the things that are discussed in this paper just aren't necessary to go into the background. It's interesting to us because we're so you know, tied up in what has gone on. So, and again, I will just make my own outline based on yours, and so that you can go through, you know, how I would look at it differently. As to what we show people to talk about monuments, that's something that I think we're really going to have to think carefully about, to give examples about history of monuments and good examples of monuments and newer monuments. Some of the, you know, the design, I think we have to, because again, we're working with a tight time frame, that we're going to have to choose carefully and have real reasons for choosing those examples, and that's not presented yet. So I'm sure Joe Hibbert can talk about more, describe that more, his reasoning. But and I want to make a comment that, you know, I don't know how many people even here knew about the Wheaton, Illinois, the design that Sasaki did with those stelae. And Joe's not here, I wish he was here. I think he was designed those, and it's very similar to what he has proposed for us in Concord. And I hope that's you know, that's in this design. I think we need to be transparent about that. Yeah, just I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Tui, do you have any? Oh,
Oh,
sorry, go ahead, Kate.
No, right. I'm just curious about being transparent. Are you saying that we need to can you explain what you mean by that?
All I mean is that he had, you know, some of the other examples that he gave, of the artists who were the creators, you know, designers of the memorials that are in this packet are named. And because I think even Sasaki, I think Joe,
That's in there under the Sasaki.
yeah, I think Joe Hibbert even designed the one in Bristers Hill, right? The
No,
thorough.
he didn't. I mean,
Oh.
Sasaki did, but he
Saki,
didn't.
okay, so Saki, okay, sorry,
And I
didn't
don't
know.
think he did Wheaton, but maybe he did.
I looked at that. I think you
Okay.
did because it's on
Okay.
the website. And even the glass company that made those Celli proudly advertised that they made them. So that's really good. Yeah.
Okay. Tui or Krista, your animals, do you have any feedback?
Oh,
You can't sit in the house without Sparky getting on your lap. And I usually I'm in the
Sparky.
studio, but I haven't been out in my studio for a week. But I did want to say something about the maybe it's feedback for you, Polly.
That's what
My
we're doing, yep.
my
Feedback from
sense
Polly and Joe.
of the presentation is really going to focus on, yes, the memorial concept that we're going forward with. And we may want to do something separate for the trees, because I keep thinking about what you've accomplished, Krista. And really, yes, everybody, it's what Krista has accomplished with these trees. And we can't even get a sign on them to say they're the 250 at this point, right, Krista? I mean, so somehow I hope that that can come to fruition in a way that everyone in the town can understand what's happened here. And that may not be this thing we're working on right here. I'm just saying that. But I think in the whole group, as we go forward, we really want to deal with that and find a way to deal with that and find a way to get that into the paper and et cetera.
Mhm.
Kate, did you want to?
I just want to say I agree with you so much, because I do so much publicity and marketing, and to not toot your own horn and to show what goodwill this committee has is giving to this town is just, that's crazy. That's just
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Because it took a lot of work, and a lot of very talented people worked on it, and that should be acknowledged, and they should be thanked. I mean, they volunteered their time, and they created, and it should start from the very beginning of what, I mean, this is my opinion. I'm sorry. I believe it should trace the entire process, you know. For somebody had this idea, it continued, and
Yeah.
I think that's something people want to know. They want to understand, you
And they'd
know.
be very interested in hearing about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this is the same committee trying
Mm-hmm.
to do another great thing for the town. So that is important for them to understand.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
really appreciate that. Thank you, Kate. And I, you know, I wasn't feeling like the tree project was being slighted at all in this.
No, I'm sure
because
you
I
did.
agree that it was like this, we need to talk about the monument.
No, I only
but
brought it up because I thought it would help the monument. I was being completely, I was not being a good person when I said it. No.
well, while you were talking, I was thinking like, what if I would find someone else to do this who is more talented than me, but put together like just a quick little video, and we could even like have some footage of the trees and Eric and the tree warden, and just do like a 2-minute
minute,
video
yeah.
or something like that we could show people
Great.
about the trees and
Yes.
yeah.
Excellent.
Okay.
The bags.
All right.
I'm just more feedback for Krista, for Polly, because I want to give her some too.
I just want to follow up on that. Are we going to have, isn't there going to be some event kind of, it's not an unveiling of the trees, but we should have an event to celebrate this. And that could be when you're talking about it in the introduction. If the event is not held before that, then it could be introduced then, and everybody could be encouraged to come.
Sure. I don't want to hijack the agenda, but I did meet with my tree volunteers last week, and we talked about doing something on West Concord Day in West Concord, something on ag.
We'll probably have time tonight to talk about that if you want, and once we get through this week, because we have other items, we definitely could talk about that.
Let's pause that. Okay.
The only feedback I have, I think what you guys did was really strong. I think it was Krista who maybe said it, about setting it in a wider context early on. I think the more you can let people see that this is part of a big national conversation or world conversation about how we memorialize things, so that people see it's not just a small little thing about a piece of land in the center of town, but it's really, we're a part of this bigger movement. How do we want Concord represented in that? I think that's very appealing to people, and it's important.
Yeah.
I think that making sure if we read it and we had a couple of people say, oh, I read it, it maybe felt like it was defending. So I think you want to take a careful look at all the language in it to overcompensate for that, to make sure we're going to come across as open and welcoming to new ideas and helping people think about it. This is our best thinking, and we want just make sure that you kind of like do a language check so that we don't get caught in not being clear for people like, hey, we want to know what you think. Like kind of overdo that, I guess. I think it's important. And then those new images, those are pretty darn crucial because it's the first time we've seen it and it helps people see it set in a context. And then for better or worse, we can't go back in time, but we used a video which was computer generated, which made like the wall seem enormous, or it made, this is much more proportional. So getting those up front on the flyer, just like lots of obviousness to those pictures, I think will be helpful. So
Thank you. Totally agree.
Wally, do you have any clarifying questions? People just threw a lot of feedback at you. Is there anyone like you're like, I wrote it down, but I'm not sure what you meant to any of us in the group?
I don't think so. I think you've been very helpful. I think this is a lot of really good feedback.
Okay.
I think I'm going to reach out to some of you for, I think it's really helpful to have more people look at it, and it will take some reality testing, from whether we're getting it right. So
I just have one more thing, Polly.
okay.
So I went to the when you made the presentation originally, when Sasaki did at the library, I went to that, and there was a way to give feedback, and that was what I had a problem with during that presentation, because it was overly controlled, and I felt like I couldn't give my feedback within that framework. It was like, because it broke it down into all these little elements, and I found that difficult, and I understood why you were doing it that way, but when you're not working with all this information all the time, you don't see it that way. When you're just seeing it the first time, when you're just it would be one thing if I had studied it for a week, then I might have been able to give that type of feedback. So that's what I wanted to let you know, that and I would like this to be a much more folksy presentation if that's possible, just in general.
Kate, when you talk about, I'm very interested in this too, because feedback is everything. I always kind of feel that narrative feedback is kind of the best. So the Post-its were hard to where do I put what I want to say? Where does it fit? But,
It didn't fit in the right category. I
right.
agree. I couldn't figure it out.
So would like what Nancy and I have been talking about is a questionnaire where at the end you could have like 6 questions or 5 questions that would allow you, we've talked about different types of memorial concepts. What is your thought on this? Or we're talking about celebrating people whose voices haven't been heard. That's the mandate from the Park Service. Are you in line with this? Is this something you agree with? Those kinds of, is that what you're thinking of for feedbacks, or more narrative?
No.
Nope.
Not. I feel like people feel on the spot when they're asked specific questions. I think if you can get people to open up within a group, to have a discussion, I feel like that works a little better when you break up into small groups sometimes, so people don't feel quite as nervous about speaking. And not everybody is good at writing. Not everybody can put their thoughts into writing. Most people are more conversational.
Mhm.
And also, when people are talking, you can ask them to clarify, and you can, because they might say something, and then you can answer that question really quickly and say, oh yeah, blah blah blah, without being defensive. And so I just feel like that gives you a lot better, having run group therapy sessions before I had an arts center. when I was a social worker, I just felt like those were the best way to really get people to open up about what they are thinking. That's
For the times when people are actually gathered looking at this,
Mhm.
for those modalities, having small working groups works. And there will be other modalities where it'll be an online
Yeah.
thing where, but I
Yeah.
see what you're saying.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
Nancy?
And also, you know, people want to have a reaction to those beautiful drawings. You can tell them, you know, spend 20 minutes telling them the history of this group and what they think, but really what they're going to react to are those
Right.
images and how they're going to feel when they walk down the street and are in our, you know, and those glass monuments will be there. That's what they're going to react to. They're not going to react to what our thought process was.
Okay.
I don't think. Yeah. I mean, that's just my gut reaction to what you're. I don't know if it's true or not.
So
But
actually,
that's how I would.
I have a clarifying question around that, Kate,
Mhm.
which is, does that make you feel that
Mhm.
this, the direction that we have been taking about examining that decision to work in sort of educational narrative stories or quotations, or, you know, a sort of a language, a place, a monument that where the words and the language are elevated and the forms are quieter. Whether, so we've been thinking that that would be the fruitful conversation. Are you saying that you don't agree with that? You know, as opposed to looking at something like the Liberty Hat or
Oh no.
you know,
You know what? I think so. I'm not. What I'm saying is that there's two things that are happening. People aren't actually going to know what the stelae are going to have, what the words are going to be. We can't present that to them yet. We can just give them a notion that it's about people who have. So I think all they can react to are the shapes in space in that spot. You know, that's what you're asking them to react to. I mean, you have a general idea about what is going to be said on them. I think if you go too far into what those are, then you open up a whole can of worms of, oh no, I don't like that one, and I don't want that person, and I don't think that's correct. So you have two different things happening. Whether if there's sculpture there, that would be, I think it would be cool if you could put a sculpture on that little landing pad and say, and this was what this would look like, you know? And, you know, maybe you're going to have some words on the ground. But I think they're going to react.
But do you think that's the question? I mean, is that a question that we want to organize the conversations around? You know,
Well, Polly, I don't know. So what is the point of this? You know, isn't that the point is to inspire them to be interested enough to give their opinion about whether they think this is good or bad. Um, am I? Does that make sense? I mean, I
Yes.
think that you've gotten great feedback about the conceptual, you know, the words that you want to use. You've had a lot of agreement, you know, that people would like that. But that will be a whole different can of worms once you have those words. I don't know if you want to put that up for whether or not people will have a say about that. I don't see that as, that might not be that productive. But
Yeah, no, I'm not suggesting putting up the words, although we did a year ago when we had our thing in the library, we had some samples, you know, some mock-ups that had potential text, but not really vetted text.
Yeah.
We could pull those back out again if that would help people. But we've been going back, or we've been assuming that we would go back a step before that to examine that basic question, which really drives so much of the way it looks and feels, that it is language-based.
So here's what I would do. If you do want to give people different options, I would use the same format for each of those options rather than saying, oh, and look, try to imagine this on that space.
I see what
If
you
you're
mean.
just,
Like
you
Photoshop,
know,
Photoshop something in.
Photoshop
Huh.
other options into that exact same place, because it's hard to compare apples and oranges, right?
Yeah.
You can't really tell what it would be like.
Okay.
So Polly,
I think Nancy's been trying to get in for a while.
Sorry, Nancy.
Okay, so yeah, there's a lot of what a lot to respond to with this discussion, especially things that Kate said. First of all, Kate, you missed our discussion. I mean, we work a smaller group, so we did talk about the format of the presentations, and we agreed that, you know, there'll be many different kinds, some small groups, some larger groups, because I, like you, want this to be less formal and more casual. That's very important to me. I would prefer that it's more about discussion on a casual level. And I definitely think it's important to make people feel comfortable and welcome to say what's on their mind. And I also understand that people have different ways of communicating, and they're ready to, you know, communicate in different times. And so I like the idea of having, I like the idea, I like the idea of small groups, but what I would worry about is that if there are different small groups in one room, there might be two people in each group that really need to be talking to each other. So I'm hoping that all of our groups are small enough that, because I like that, town meeting, I love it that when we have a question at town meeting, that everybody is listening and to each other and can change their minds or respond to other people. So that's the first thing. And the sticky notes, I hate the sticky notes. That was, I couldn't get my thoughts together then. I just didn't even do it because it was just too much for me. And I just thought it would get lost in the whole big pile of sticky notes. Sticky note grape. So one of the things that I suggested is that we could think about with a questionnaire is not a questionnaire that we're going to statistically look at, but rather just give people something that they can take away, and then they can mail it back or bring it back or an email so that they can go back and think about what they've heard. Some people might enjoy that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that the discussions can go in so many different directions. And I continue to say that we need to anticipate questions and responses that come up, because there is no content. And I find that extremely problematic. I think that people are going to come and say, some people will come and say, you're giving us a design, what's going to go on there? And we haven't given there. In this presentation, there's absolutely no guideline. There's no name. There's not one single name that, oh, this, and we did have that in one of the public forums, that it could be Thoreau or a quote by, or Louise Malcott, or so that's, people are going to be questioning, what is this? What is the PMS really asking us for? And I'm confused about whether now, after hearing this whole discussion, you know, the presentation, it said we were backing away, not backing away, but putting aside the Sasaki conceptual design and opening it up to other ideas. But it sounds like there's not a clear cut decision about that, because what I'm hearing is that that's in this presentation statement, but on the other hand, we're spending a lot of time talking about the elements, which I'm happy with. I think that we do need to explain what the design, why it was created, what it was created to do. And we're going to explain that we have a flat surface for a narrative, but we haven't said what that narrative is, and the sky's the limit. I mean, there's there's just so many possibilities. And I think that we haven't done our jobs with that. And I'm worried about that that this is going to come up in the presentation and the presentations and the discussions. And we need to think about how we're going to respond to that. And again, it's a short time. It's only, you know, an hour. So the discussions could go in lots, you know, go in different directions. People could start talking about the design or the content, or whether it should be sculpture or narrative.
Polly, do you have a
Well,
question
just
to get
one question
get clarity
that
from Nancy?
yeah, so I would be interested to know. I mean, we have names that you all know that the committee has talked about, from Dugan to Thoreau to Emerson. You know, names to Garrison, and I mean, so we can come with examples. You're right. There's nothing in there now, and I was wondering that maybe we should say these are who we've been thinking about. But I also think we need to be honest that they're not set in stone, so to speak, because we're, or anything else. We haven't gotten to that point yet. And if we decide what the community really wants is a sculptural element, then we'll have a whole other set of decisions to make, right? So, but what do you think about that? Do we want to offer those?
I just think
names? Does
that
that
we
make it
have
too concrete?
we have a statement of purpose that says a lot of things, that it says we want to honor, you know, people of color. We want to lift up stories about, the indigenous history of our area. We want to lift up the stories of women. So, and we want to lift up the names that we've rediscovered of the people who died in the Revolutionary War. People are going to ask about those specific things because that's on people's minds. The Historical Commission did, we're doing this presentation preservation project, and we did a questionnaire, and people overwhelmingly said they want to hear more about Indigenous history and the history of enslavement in Concord. So people are going to come, you know, bringing all of those thoughts with them.
That's good.
That's good. Yeah.
Krista?
Yeah, well, I
Krista?
wonder,
I want that, but this is it's just so open-ended for me, and they're going to say, you know, well, why are you showing us this design?
They
You
may
know,
say that.
that-
They may.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
I wonder if
Krista.
it would be helpful to, you know, because we've talked about these themes, but I don't think have we ever, you know, and then we showed, like Nancy said, people, you know, examples of people that might be quoted, but could we have, you know, 5 or 6 themes
Yeah.
that we would say to people, you know, social justice, racial justice, abolition movement, suffragist movement. You know, are we missing? Is there anything that you're not seeing here that you would want to see reflected in this monument? And then, you know, that could sort of spur a conversation too. But that might be one sort of interim step before actually getting to content, that we have
Right,
the
sort of themes and people
categories
who
for the
might
content.
go along with them.
Yeah.
Kate?
I think we can also simplify it and say we would like to create a monument for all those who fought for freedom that lived in our town. You know, instead of our statement is, you know, explainy. Maybe it needs to be, you know, maybe we need to generalize it so that when we say we want to do this, people can say, yeah, I like the idea of us representing that. That's cool, right? And I think when we get into the weeds of who it is and what it is, and then it's almost too much information. Am I wrong? Or I don't, that's what, if I was there, I would say, oh yeah, I like that idea.
So I think the feedback that what I hear Kate saying is maybe work on a little sentence or a tagline that summarizes the statement of purpose in a way people can understand it.
Yeah,
And
I would say so.
and you could,
I don't like the idea of taglines. I'm sorry. I think we should have at the door a card with the statement of purpose that people can have in their hand.
As well. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we need to be.
I'm just saying, I'm just reiterating what I thought I heard Kate say, so Polly has it for her notes.
and I think to Nancy's point, we could easily take the example of Ellen Garrison, where we actually do have quotes, and just give a few of those as an example. If we're showing the example of the stelae, you know, that could be part of the presentation, which we could use or not use depending upon where we were doing it. But we certainly have that. We have some of the content already.
Yeah. You got Thoreau too. You could, and people are used to
Thoreau,
seeing
you've got
Garrison,
Alcott.
Thoreau sitting there, so that might be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have narrative and content already. We just don't have the full bore, which we won't get until we have that working group or something, if we decide to go down this road. And we're not going to get that until we make those decisions.
So I'm just keeping an eye on the time for us. Seems like Polly, you have a decent amount of feedback to take
Yeah,
back
no,
to
this is
Joe.
super helpful.
Um,
I'm
want to
really
say-
grateful. I agree with.
I just have a clarifying question about time. Like, would you want another 2 weeks to get this to the next stage, or do you want an update next week? What would be helpful for you for our scheduling? Because we have this space every Thursday, but we don't need to have a full group meeting if there's nothing, if you need a couple of weeks.
Well, I would suggest if the group feels this makes sense, that we don't have a full group meeting next week, but maybe the working group should, we'll see if we can get it to the next level, and the working group can then see how we're doing, if we've incorporated this feedback. And does that make sense to everybody?
Yes, I can't come next week anyway, so.
Well, there you
Okay.
So that would make the next, I must look at calendar, that would be the next full group meeting would be the 6th of March. Yeah. Tui,
Yeah.
do you have that down?
Yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah,
And-
same time,
and-
same place.
And we'll do ours, same time, same place next week. Nancy, Polly, Joe and me. And you're in touch with Joe, right, Polly? Because you're still working on. So just tell him that that next week we're back on, just the four of us.
Kate?
Polly, would it be helpful if I sent you a few possible sculptures to Photoshop into the little spot?
Yeah.
Just
I
for
can't
getting
tell you that I know how to do Photoshop that well, but I bet Joe
I
does.
know.
Yeah,
Oh,
Joe
you
does,
said
I'm sure.
Photoshop, so I wouldn't know how to do it. So I respect that. Yes. Okay. I'll send like 2 or 3, or
Great.
that might not be fair. Maybe it should just be one, so you can say, "Oh, this is an example of this and this."
I give it 2 or 3. That more is
Okay. Sounds
more
Yeah,
good.
is
if
good.
you send 2 or 3, we can
Figure it out. Okay. Sounds good.
That sounds great.
Nancy?
All
I
right.
just want to quickly say that two things are left out of the presentation that people are going to ask about, and that is what's going to happen with the Thoreau marker, and what is going to happen, and or is parcel 1693 still the place, or will it be the place where the newly discovered names that Beth Van Duzer has uncovered are going to be? And there's nothing in that, and people, well, it's important to me that we figure out, we're the Permanent Memorial Committee, and we need to figure that out ourselves. If we don't want it there, then we should say that, but I think we need to address that.
Yeah, absolutely, Nancy.
But
I mean, it's in the statement of purpose, so if it's not in the presentation, it's gotta be in the
And we're
presentation.
talking about it, and to me, that's,
Well,
you know,
And I think that gets to the question of if we're going to be talking about specific concepts for the memorials, that would be one of them, I think, we
Yeah.
just stated.
And it
there.
could just
So
be reinforced when you're
we
doing
can-
the
I
statement
think
of
that's
purpose.
should absolutely be.
'Cause it's in
included.
there.
And Thoreau is
and-
there too, so.
Right.
Is the timeline in the presentation? What I can
Yes.
Okay. We haven't talked about it
Currently.
tonight, so I wasn't sure
No, we didn't.
what
I-
it was. I didn't
jumped
and I
over it.
didn't see it in the picture.
Well, the
that-
picture's not a great picture, so I'm hoping we can get a better picture. But.
I mean, the good news is, to me, you guys are taking a very careful approach to the rework, and this is going to take time. It's going to take time to do this well, and it's going to take time to have this conversation. It's going to take time to design and build a memorial and engage the community. And we finally have that pressure off us now to have to like get something organized. And this seems like a much more reasonable timeline to really figure out with the community what we want to do. And what's the rush? Let's talk,
Right. And
Mm,
Joe, I think it's really important if we can, I know it's almost 6 o'clock, but if we can turn to Krista for just a minute, Krista, because you've discovered some things have been happening that you wanted to talk about. Can we do that, Joe? Do we have time?
Well, it depends, Krista. It's your call. If it's important and you want us to wait, otherwise it'd have to wait 2 weeks. So it's up to you.
I'll just do the 30-second overview. So so I've been working with the volunteer group again to identify a couple of different opportunities like West Concord Day and Ag Day to have a little celebration, and we'll celebrate the tree that goes in at the library. We'll celebrate the tree that goes in at Mandrioli Park in West Concord. We talked about tree tags. So we'll have those in addition to the watering bags. But yeah, and at another time when we have more time on an agenda, I'd love to talk a little bit more about other ways to celebrate it and get it in another piece into the bridge. And once the trees actually start going in
So
again.
should we make sure that we put that on the agenda next
Yeah.
time?
Yeah.
Molly, was
And
that a
also a
comment? Yeah.
question about,
Go
I
ahead,
would
go ahead.
love to make some swag for the trees. So that is something I would love to try to accomplish.
and I was wondering about the parade. Is there going to be a float filled with trees in the parade?
Oh,
The only
God.
thing
Which I think would be
the only thing I
really,
do
really
know,
great.
Yeah.
the ag committee is doing a float for Concord farmers.
Yeah.
And they're having a meeting tomorrow at Beryl Farm, I think at 1:30 in the greenhouse. It's a public meeting. It's their parade subcommittee. So
Oh,
I don't know if anyone has time, maybe drop by, maybe they could do that on their
Well,
Is there an
float.
extra hay
Maybe,
wagon?
maybe Kate could make us all some t-shirts to wear in the parade.
well, actually, I wanted to make giant costumes of trees for you all to wear on the float.
That's
So
that's
I-
great
Like from the
too.
Wizard of Oz. Don't you think that's nice? Yeah.
I'm trying to
Dennis,
be mindful of, I'm trying to be mindful of time, and we need to make a little space for public comment. So let's just hang on tight so that we get some public comment in and still try to keep to our time as closely as possible. So I see Dennis raise his hand, so we're going to go first. Dennis, would you like to make some public comment?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, and click on your camera if you can.
I did. I was told I was cut off by you guys.
Oh. Do my best.
Pop-up says you.
Sometimes we
the
have
host has
control of
stopped
this,
it.
sometimes we don't. So go ahead, start talking.
I sit here just amazed at where this conversation went. I heard at the select board meeting that you were going back to scratch and you were going to take a look at this thing again and come up with some new designs. Matter of fact, several select board members afterwards said to me, their only disappointment in your presentation is you didn't dump your current proposal, which is widely not liked in the community. So what you're doing here is going to a discussion of your concept, your charge, and your statement of purpose, and you've come around to defending what you've already done and asking people to tweet it. I don't understand this. I assumed that you would have these public meetings to get input on what they want in a monument and to sell what you're doing, which I think is excellent, by the way. And then you're going to have then you're going to go out and look for ways to come up with new proposals for this site. And I don't hear any of that. I hear the same old thing. I hope that you're not going to show any visuals at all at these meetings because that prejudices the whole process.
Thank you, Dennis. Nancy?
Well, Dennis said some of what I was going to say.
Darn him.
I think this meeting was never, ever about the Rev War people who we have recently discovered and who need to be remembered. That's one thing. Nancy's the only person who said it very late in the meeting. I have to take issue with the idea that we're the only few people who are concerned about this. The committee was a committee of 5 when they came up with this concept. And my interpretation of the feedback from those problematical stickies did not endorse overwhelmingly at all the concept that was presented that night. In fact, I can send that around. I've tabulated it myself. And the conclusion at one of your meetings was we now have a town consensus for going forward with this process. And that's just not the case. So that's very disappointing. The other thing that's disappointing is there has never been any kind of a cost estimate for what's been proposed for a very long time. The stele with all the stories and quotes and whatnot are going to be very expensive to engrave. It's been said too, there's no content in spite of having tried a working group, and some of the feedback we've received from that is that it was doomed from the beginning because they don't know what, they have a design, but it was very unfocused. So I still hear Mary Hartman's comment at the select board meeting, and I had the same opinion that there were going to be new concepts, but this is all about a public relations effort to sell the old concept. And I just think it's so disappointing to me. There are many more people. who are concerned about this, and I hate to see that minimized. Mary Hartman said she was so glad that you were all going back to the drawing board. And that's the impression that they got and that they were given at that meeting. So.
Thank you, Nancy. Are there any other public comment? Okay. So Polly, take the feedback both you heard from the committee and then you've heard from the public and integrate that into the next versions you're working on. And if folks want to participate and watch the working group as they go ahead, their next meeting is going to be at the same time here on Zoom. And then in 2 weeks, we'll have a larger group meeting. I'm going back to the committee now. Is there any comments from the subcommittee before we end up? Because we're a bit over time. Nancy?
Dennis, did you have another comment? Your hand is still up. You're muted. You're muted, Dennis.
No further comments. Sorry, the hand is still there.
Okay. You know, I'm really trying to be positive about this, and I'm sorry. I am very interested in what if we have these presentations. I do want to listen to what people say. I really do, because I want to confirm that of where the consensus is, to take, you know, the temperature of where the community is. For me, that's what this is. But you know, and I'm trying to be really supportive of the work that our commission is doing, or subcommittee is doing. But I still think that we are. I think that Nancy's comment is right, that we're really trying to sell the Sasaki conceptual design and not really being very open about leaving other options, and it's very unrealistic, really. We don't have any funding. We've already spent $75,000, as I understand it. Well, I know that because it's in the executive committee meetings. We've already spent that money, so there's no money left. We'd have to fundraise if we came up with any other ideas. In the beginning, Gary Clayton had said to the executive committee that he was going to consider having a competition for sculpture, for artists to design a sculpture. That never happened. And we only went to one person. We only went to one firm. And I don't know how, who knew that person, but, people are going, I'm trying to protect the PMS too, because that's why I keep saying that we need to anticipate these questions. Because I respect the work that all of us have done. But Joe Hibbert is still on this commission. He's the designer, and he's putting these presentations together. So he's playing a very active role, even though he's no longer being paid. I just think that I'm not the only one that's going to say this. There are going to be others. And I think we need to be able to answer these questions before we go forward with the presentations.
So Nancy, we did talk about this. We decided not to have a competition. We decided to hire some help, very much in keeping with how.
I've read all the minutes. I know what happened.
Yeah, but we did decide.
Go ahead, Tui, finish what you're saying.
We wanted to get a conceptual design and to figure that space out. We did not have the experience. We had people with experience. And what we did is the same thing as what the Historic Districts Commission and the Concord Historical Commission did, to hire a group to come up with a historic preservation plan.
This is different.
Very similar. We said we need expertise, and we hired Sasaki. They gave us a conceptual plan, which
Julie,
yes,
you're right. We all know the history of how we got here, and Nancy may have a different viewpoint on that, and that's really not what we need to figure out at this point. We have a plan. There's got some good public comment feedback. Polly and Joe have to do more work, and we'll meet in 2 weeks. And Nancy and you are helping with that, and that, it's all we can do is listen and do our best to try to incorporate it, and keep walking down that path. We can't go back in time. We can't redo the past. We can only acknowledge where we're at now and try to create something better. We may think we're creating something better. Others may tell us we're not. And that's all we can do is just keep trying to take the feedback and try to do better. That's really our only hope at this point, to try to do good work. I know that everyone on this committee is doing their best, and everyone speaks with goodwill, and they speak with their own perspective, and having multiple perspectives is good. That's actually, that's a great quote that Mary Hartman gave me. I forget about how when people disagree and ideas combat, that's when thinking happens. So that's really what we're doing. This is an iterative thinking process, and we're going to end up in a better place as hard as it might be. So I'd like to, as we're 11 minutes over time, I'd like to move to call the meeting closed.
Melissa
Let
had a
Polly and
comment.
Nancy continue their work.
I think everybody's willing to stay on. I don't think I think we should let people speak. They've listened to this, and I think that we should let one person speak. Joe, I'm sorry.
Melissa hasn't spoken yet, so we can't go back to new people, but Melissa, if you want to go ahead and try to unmute.
I'm unmuted. So I just have a simple clarification for what Tui said. When the Historical Commission went forward to develop a preservation plan, we sought out at least 3 different vendors and evaluated them, which is my understanding that what we do in Concord is we always seek at least 3 bids, 3 options. So I just want you to know.
Yeah, I can clarify that. Yeah, Melissa, you had asked that question, and we clarified it at the next meeting. I don't think you were at that meeting. We didn't know when you asked last time. It's like, don't know. Let's find out. So we went back, talked to Gary Clayton, who was the chair at the time, and it's a very specific policy. I think it deals with landscape architects and other architectural consultants that a town needs to hire. They have a different legal bidding process, and he and the town manager were very clear. They consulted legal in the town, and they followed all the necessary requirements for obtaining the consultation of Sasaki Service. So it was a good question you asked last time. We did clarify it, and it all was done in the most appropriate way possible. There's something different about architectural landscape firms.
It'd be good to see a citation for that.
Thank you. If you have any questions, it's a good question, Nancy. If you have any questions, feel free to call the town manager's office. They can help you with it. But yeah, so we've got work to do. Thank you for your work, and thank you, public, for taking the time to come here and ask us good questions. And we're just going to keep trying to work and do our best job, but we're not perfect. We're going to keep at it. So on that, Tui, are you fine with me, Tui, calling the meeting to close?
Yeah, okay, we'll call the meeting to a close.
All right, thank you.
At 6.
Have a good evening,
you.
everyone. Stay warm.
Good
Summer
night.
will be back
Thanks,
soon.
gang.